The transmission began with a fanfare, an eerie, synthesized orchestra that echoed across the void. Billions across the galaxy tuned in, some out of morbid curiosity, others because they had no choice. The broadcast was mandatory in all territories under the Galactic Empire's rule. It was a statement, a demonstration of absolute power, and a warning. A panoramic view of a vast execution platform filled the screen, its edges stretching beyond sight. 80,000 human women stood in perfect lines, their expressions ranging from defiance to hollow resignation. Above them, a massive holographic banner pulsed with shifting alien script, its meaning translating in real time for human viewers. Obedience is life. At the center of the broadcast stood the Emperor's Grand Inquisitor, a towering figure draped in ceremonial robes, his 3 reptilian eyes scanning the assembled prisoners with something almost akin to amusement. His voice, guttural and thick with arrogance, resonated through the broadcast. This is the fate of those who resist. He gestured grandly to the prisoners. Let this stand as proof. The Empire is merciful to those who obey, and swift to those who defy. He raised a clawed hand. The executioners, faceless enforcers of the Empire, stood at attention, waiting for his signal. Then he brought his hand down. The trapdoors beneath the prisoners snapped open in unison. In an instant, 80,000 lives were extinguished. The camera didn't cut away. It lingered, zooming in on limp bodies swaying from industrial strength cables, their faces frozen in expressions of finality. The galaxy held its breath. The broadcast continued for precisely 2 minutes and 14 seconds, enough time for the horror to settle, for the lesson to be absorbed. And then, with clinical precision, the signal was cut, leaving only silence. For the Galactic Empire, this was just another routine subjugation. For humanity, it was something else entirely. The moment the transmission ended, Earth erupted. It started as a ripple, a single, stunned moment shared by billions across the planet. Then came the screaming, the breaking of glass, the shattering of control screens as enraged hands flung them against walls. Cities shook with an outpouring of raw fury. In the war rooms of Earth's defense networks, alarms blared, not as a warning of incoming attacks, but as an overwhelming flood of military units going to full readiness. The United Terran government, normally slow and burdened by bureaucracy, moved with a singular purpose. Every human on the planet, whether soldier or civilian, knew the same undeniable truth. This was war. And at the center of it all, one man sat in silence, his expression unreadable. Ambassador Ben Reynolds had seen atrocities before. He had been Earth's representative in the Galactic Senate for over a decade, enduring endless debates, backhanded negotiations, and the condescending arrogance of alien bureaucrats who saw humans as an annoyance rather than equals. He had been patient. He had swallowed his pride. But this was different. The glass of whiskey in his hand trembled slightly as he stared at the darkened screen in his private quarters on the orbital station. His other hand clenched so tightly around the armrest of his chair that the reinforced material cracked under the pressure. The ice in his drink melted, the condensation dripping onto his sleeve, but he didn't notice. The silence in the room was thick, suffocating. Then, with a deliberate motion, he set the glass down and stood. His assistant, a young man named Ortiz, stood frozen near the doorway. "Sir?" he asked cautiously. Ben exhaled slowly. When he spoke, his voice was calm. Too calm. "Get me a direct channel to the Senate." Ortiz hesitated. "Sir, the protocol." "I don't give a damn about protocol." Ben's eyes were dark, unreadable. "I want every alien in that chamber looking me in the goddamn eyes when I say this." Ortiz swallowed hard and obeyed. Minutes later, Ben stood before the Galactic Senate's Grand Chamber, his image projected into the center of the massive hall. Hundreds of alien delegates, some floating in anti-grav chairs, others standing on elevated platforms, turned their eyes toward him, expecting the usual human outrage, the impotent pleas for justice. Instead, they got Ben Reynolds. He adjusted the cuff of his benet, ran a hand through his short cropped hair, and then put on his aviator sunglasses, Because if humanity was about to declare war, it was damn well going to do it in style. A few senators chuckled, mistaking his lack of immediate outburst for restraint. That mistake lasted precisely 5 seconds. "Ladies and gentlemen," Ben said, his voice carrying through the chamber with an eerie steadiness, "I just watched 80,000 of my people murdered on live television." Murmurs rippled through the assembly. Some were expressions of mock sympathy. Others, from species more familiar with human unpredictability, were tinged with something else: fear. Ben continued, "I imagine some of you think we'll react like the other species you've conquered, grief-stricken, begging for mercy, eager to negotiate." His lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You poor dumb bastards." A ripple of unease swept through the chamber. "You see, humans are funny. We cry, we mourn, and then we get even." He took a step forward, hands clasped behind his back, his expression unreadable behind the dark lenses. "You think you've won. You think you've shown us our place." His voice dropped low and steady. "All you've done is sign your own death warrant." The room fell silent. Ben exhaled, rolling his shoulders as if shaking off invisible chains. Then he smiled, a slow, humorless thing that sent a cold chill down the spines of those who recognized it. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a single piece of folded paper, and held it up. "This," he said conversationally, "is an official declaration of war from the United Terran government." The ink isn't even dry yet. Muffled gasps rippled through the assembly. Ben unfolded the paper with exaggerated care, making a show of reading it aloud. It says, and I quote, "The United Terran government hereby declares total and unyielding war against the Galactic Empire until the complete and utter annihilation of its ruling body is achieved." He looked up, his grin widening. "Catchy, huh?" Panic erupted. Delegates shouted over one another, scrambling to object, to downplay, to reason. Ben held up a hand, and to the surprise of many, they quieted. "You don't understand what you've done," he said, his voice almost pitying. "You've united us. We humans, we argue, we fight, we get in each other's way. But when someone comes for our own..." He chuckled, shaking his head. "We don't stop. We don't surrender. We burn everything down." The silence that followed was absolute. Ben adjusted his sunglasses, straightened his tie, and smiled one last time. "Good luck, gentlemen." Then he cut the transmission. Back on Earth, military channels flared to life. Warships mobilized. Weapons were loaded. And somewhere in the chaos of it all, someone updated the planetary status board with a single line: "Operation Hell Unleashed has begun." The Galactic Empire had expected resistance, but they had expected it to be feeble. Half-hearted protests, a few defiant pockets of rebellion, the usual cycle of discontent they had long mastered crushing. They had conquered over 100 species, each one submitting eventually, whether by fear, attrition, or sheer inevitability. But humans were not like the others. The first indication that this war would be different came not in the form of a grand armada or a desperate diplomatic plea, but in a spam email. Grand Admiral Xylock of the Imperial Armada frowned at the notification flashing on his console. It was odd. External communications were supposed to be restricted during wartime. And yet, there it was, pulsing insistently with a subject line in the common trade language. "Urgent. Your galactic account has been compromised." He ignored it. He was an admiral, not some simple-minded fool. But the messages kept coming. "Imperial Fleet Command, your credits have been suspended. Prince Nokthar needs your assistance, moving 50 million credits. Generous reward. Urgent security alert. Update your fleet encryption codes now." He snarled and slammed his fist onto the control panel, but his bridge officers were already in chaos. Every single Imperial fleet-wide communication channel had been flooded. Screens filled with nonsense, blinking alerts, and an endless barrage of human memes, some showing grotesquely exaggerated cartoon frogs and a rotund, mustachioed man in a red hat jumping over obstacles. The communications officer turned, his tendrils twitching in panic. "Sir, we've lost control of our internal networks. The humans, they're trolling us." XY scales flushed a deep violet. What in the black void does that even mean? It means, a gravelly voice said over the now compromised intercom, you should probably check your fleet's coordinates, dumbass. XY's blood ran cold. He turned just in time to see an entire human war fleet decloaking directly behind them. The humans didn't fight fair. The first wave of attacks came not in the form of conventional strikes, but sheer unpredictability. They hibernate Empire logistics networks, rerouting entire shipments of fuel and ammunition to the wrong planets. Imperial warships docked at supply stations only to find crates filled with rubber ducks, live goats, and in one particularly infamous case, a single holodisk containing nothing but a 3-hour recording of human children singing an old Earth song about an unending loop of bottles on a wall. They weaponized bureaucracy. Empire fleet movements were delayed for weeks because humans submitted an overwhelming number of official battle requests, all signed in perfect legal format, forcing entire sectors to halt operations just to process the paperwork. Then, there were the Florida men. No one knew exactly where these soldiers had been trained, but they fought like unhinged demons. They infiltrated enemy lines, wearing little more than Hawaiian shirts and sunglasses, dual-wielding energy weapons while shouting battle cries about gator wrestling championships. Reports flooded in from multiple planetary governors. Humans have deployed madmen capable of consuming raw explosives without harm. A single human soldier took down an entire platoon using a combination of beer bottles, duct tape, and sheer spite. Their warships are not engaging in traditional tactics. They are playing music loudly. Empire commanders soon learned that human warships did not operate in silence. Every fleet battle was accompanied by a soundtrack, deafening, chaotic music blaring across open channels. The melodies were alien and terrifying, filled with heavy percussion and screaming vocals. One unlucky Empire captain, during an intercepted communication, shakily described what he had heard before his ship was torn apart. It was some kind of ancient Earth war hymn. I believe they called it Highway to Hell. At the heart of this insanity stood General Boom Boom Kowalski, a man whose name was spoken in hushed terror even among his own troops. No one knew what his actual first name was. No one dared ask. What they did know was that he loved explosions. Subtlety is for cowards, Kowalski grunted as he observed a captured Imperial weapons depot. How many explosives do we have left? The quartermaster hesitated. General, sir, we were supposed to capture this facility for resources, not. Kowalski's glare could have melted steel. How many explosives? Enough to blow up a small moon. Kowalski grinned. Good. Then blow up this big-ass weapon stash and send a message. Make it loud. The explosion was visible from orbit. While Kowalski waged war on land, Admiral Amanda Rogue Carter controlled the chaos in space. She was a tactician unlike any the Empire had ever encountered. Her battle plans were erratic, reckless, and entirely unpredictable. Empire ships followed strict formation guidelines, using time-tested strategies honed over centuries of conquest. Carter, on the other hand, based her tactics entirely on 20th century Earth science fiction. Her fleet was arranged like a chessboard, with capital ships acting as rooks, destroyers moving in unpredictable night patterns, and fighters swarming like enraged bees. Empire admirals, accustomed to straightforward engagements, found themselves outmaneuvered at every turn. One fleet commander, moments before his ship was reduced to atoms, frantically attempted to decode Carter's strategy. She's using Star Wars battle formations mixed with Battlestar Galactica? And wait, those are literal pirate tactics. His second-in-command nodded grimly. Yes, sir. The humans, they're freestyling. The Empire's most devastating loss, however, came when humanity deployed the Florida-class battle stations. These were not traditional military installations. No, these were mobile, city-sized warships that doubled as casinos, liquor stores, and entertainment hubs. They were entirely self-sufficient, powered by a combination of nuclear energy, artificial suns, and what human engineers simply referred to as vibes. When the first Florida-class station warped into enemy territory, Empire troops weren't sure whether to attack or ask for a drink. Then, the doors opened, and an army of beer-fueled, sunburnt, Hawaiian shirt-wearing maniacs poured out. The result was an unmitigated disaster for the Empire. By the time the Empire realized the full scope of the threat, it was already too late. Entire fleets had been lost. Commanders had defected. Imperial soldiers, disillusioned and terrified, refused to engage humans without a guaranteed escape plan. The Galactic Senate, once a place of smug complacency, now held emergency meetings daily, their once grand speeches reduced to desperate pleas for a ceasefire. And somewhere in the chaos, standing in the middle of a battlefield littered with burning Empire ships and discarded beer cans, Ben Reynolds received a direct transmission from the Galactic Emperor himself. The Emperor, for the first time in history, looked afraid. Ben leaned forward, smirking. "So," he said, swirling a glass of whiskey, "ready to surrender yet?" The Emperor's voice was hoarse. Your people, you don't fight with honor. You fight like lunatics." Ben's smirk widened. "Yeah," he said, raising his glass in a mock toast. "That's the idea." Then he cut the transmission, and humanity prepared for the final push. The Galactic Empire had never known desperation. For centuries, it had expanded its rule through cold efficiency, conquering civilizations with overwhelming force and systematic suppression. No species had ever truly resisted, not for long. The weight of history assured them that humanity would eventually break, just like all the others. But as the Empire's war councils convened for the 1000th time since the conflict began, the truth could no longer be ignored. The humans were not breaking. They were laughing. The Emperor sat upon his throne, his clawed fingers tapping restlessly against the carved stone armrests. The chamber was filled with the highest-ranking officers of the Empire, each one struggling to maintain composure. Grand Admiral Xylock, his usual confidence shattered, stood stiffly before the throne, his scales tinged with stress-induced discoloration. "Report," the Emperor growled. Xylock swallowed hard before speaking. "Your Majesty, the humans have overrun 73 Imperial systems. Their tactics remain unconventional. Our fleets have sustained catastrophic losses. Our supply chains have been infiltrated. Our war councils," he hesitated, his voice dropping slightly, "are being ridiculed across the galactic network." The Emperor's 3 eyes narrowed. Ridiculed. A second officer, one of the few remaining fleet tacticians, stepped forward hesitantly. "Sir, the humans have somehow taken control of multiple Holonet entertainment channels. They have edited battle footage. They are broadcasting compilations of their most absurd victories, complete with dramatic music, slow-motion replays, and sarcastic commentary." "Explain," the Emperor ordered. The officer reluctantly activated a datapad. The chamber lights dimmed as a recording was projected into the air. A deep human voice, dripping with mock gravitas, filled the chamber. "Welcome back to Galactic Dumbass, where we highlight the finest moments in Imperial strategic failure. Up first, watch as an entire Imperial dreadnought gets tricked into flying straight into a human-built black hole generator. That's right, folks. Who needs superior firepower when you have physics and a total disregard for safety?" The projection showed an enormous Imperial warship being drawn into the swirling abyss of an artificial gravity well. The crew's last recorded messages were displayed as subtitles. "This isn't possible. This isn't." The transmission cut off as the ship vanished. The voiceover continued, accompanied by human laughter. "Up next, how do you confuse an Imperial command fleet? Easy. Just replace their navigation charts with a human star map featuring the locations of every intergalactic liquor store. That's right, folks. Entire armadas have been lost following what they thought were strategic retreat paths, only to end up in the middle of nowhere, running out of fuel, while the humans sit back and watch." The chamber was silent. The officers averted their eyes as the Emperor seethed. His tail lashed against the marble floor, cracking it. "Enough," he growled. The recording was cut. His gaze snapped to Xylock. "This cannot continue. What solutions have you devised?" Xylock straightened. trying to muster whatever dignity he had left. We must strike at the heart of the human war machine. Their tactics are unpredictable, but their leadership is still centralized. If we can eliminate their command structure, we may finally force them to negotiate. A shadow moved near the back of the chamber, and a new voice, silky and calculating, slid into the conversation. There is another way. The figure stepped forward, cloaked in flowing crimson robes. The assembled officers stiffened as they recognized the high executor of the Empire's intelligence division, an operative so feared that his name was rarely spoken aloud. The Emperor regarded him with wary interest. "Speak." The executor smiled, though it did not reach his eyes. "Humanity's strength is its unpredictability. Yes. But even the wildest beast can be tamed if you understand its nature. Humans thrive in chaos, but chaos can be manipulated. I propose we set a trap, one so enticing that they cannot resist walking straight into it." The Emperor leaned forward. "And how do you propose to accomplish this?" The executor's smile widened. "We give them exactly what they want. A final battle. A grand confrontation, staged on a battlefield of our choosing, where their reckless nature will be their undoing." There was a murmur among the officers. Wylock hesitated. "We've never seen humans turn down a fight, but they've also never fought where we expected them to. What if they recognize the deception?" The executor clasped his hands together. "They will know it is a trap, and they will come anyway." The Emperor's eyes gleamed with cruel amusement. "Very well. Set the bait." Across the galaxy, the Empire broadcasted a single message on all known human frequencies. "Humanity, you claim to be warriors. You claim to be relentless. We offer you one final test. Meet us at the Velmora system. Bring your full strength. Prove you are more than just chaos. Prove you are worthy of victory." The response came within the hour. A single transmission, featuring the grinning face of Ambassador Ben Reynolds. He was holding a cigar in one hand, a drink in the other. "Oh, you poor dumb bastards," he said. "See you soon." The Velmora system became the most fortified location in the history of the Empire. Hundreds of warships took position in staggered formations, planetary defenses were enhanced, and contingency plans were established. And yet, when the humans arrived, they did not charge in blindly. They did not launch an all-out assault. Instead, their warships halted at the edge of the system, just beyond the range of the Empire's longest-range weapons. Silence. Then human frequencies burst to life. "Ladies and gentlemen of the Empire, thank you for joining us today. We have a special performance prepared just for you." The Empire's ships braced for an attack. Instead, human ships projected enormous holographic images across the battlefield, clips from the Empire's own propaganda, spliced together with footage of their worst defeats. The images mocked them, replaying their failures in exaggerated loops, overlaid with human laughter and dramatic music. The Empire's fleet froze. Admiral Wylock, his composure fraying, snarled, "What is this madness?" A subordinate hesitated. "Sir, the humans they're taunting us." The executor, standing aboard the Empire's command vessel, watched the display in eerie silence. "This isn't taunting," he murmured. "It's strategy." And he was right. The moment the first enraged Imperial warship broke formation to retaliate, the human fleet moved. The Empire's carefully laid trap collapsed as the humans did what they did best, fight like absolute lunatics. The battlefield dissolved into chaos. Human ships dropped out of hyperspace at reckless angles, firing before their engines even stabilized. Fighters swarmed like angry wasps, weaving between enemy defenses with impossible agility. Warships detonated asteroids, sending debris crashing into Imperial formations. On the ground, Florida Men battalions stormed planetary defenses on modified hoverbikes, wielding weapons that should not have worked, but did anyway. And somewhere in the heart of the madness, Ben Reynolds watched it all unfold from the command deck of his flagship, sipping whiskey with an amused smirk. "Guess they didn't see that coming," he mused. The battle raged for hours. The trap had become a slaughter, but not for humanity. And in the final moments, As imperial forces crumbled and commanders abandoned their posts, a final transmission was sent to the emperor himself. Ben Reynolds leaned forward, his grin widening. Checkmate. And with that, the empire fell into ruin. The emperor stood alone in the ruins of his throne room, his once great palace, now a burning husk of shattered marble and twisted metal. The banners of the Galactic Empire, symbols of dominance and fear for centuries, hung in tatters, scorched and trampled. The air was thick with the acrid stench of plasma burns, and the only sounds that remained were the distant echoes of combat still raging through the capital city. His empire, the mightiest civilization the galaxy had ever known, was gone. The great halls, where warlords and dignitaries once groveled before him, had been reduced to nothing but rubble. His war fleets, once thought invincible, lay as wreckage in orbit, the human war machine leaving nothing but wreckage and ruin in its wake. And standing before him, in the center of the destruction, was Ben Reynolds, the human ambassador. No, not an ambassador anymore. That title no longer fit. Now, he was something else entirely. The harbinger of destruction, the man who had laughed in the face of galactic conquest and burned an empire to the ground out of sheer human stubbornness and rage. Ben stepped forward, kicking aside a broken imperial sigil as he adjusted the cuffs of his benet. His aviator sunglasses were still perched on his nose, despite the flickering embers of destruction reflecting in the lenses. He took a slow drag from the cigar clutched between his fingers, exhaling a plume of smoke before tilting his head at the defeated emperor. "Well," Ben said casually, "that went about as well as expected." The emperor's 3 eyes burned with something between hatred and disbelief. He staggered forward, his once imposing form now hunched under the weight of loss. His elaborate robes were torn, his crown cracked. He had ruled over billions, had commanded entire civilizations to their knees with nothing more than a word. Now, he was reduced to nothing more than another conquered leader, another relic of the past. You are not conquerors," the emperor spat, his voice hoarse and raw. "You are chaos, a sickness that infects everything it touches." Ben exhaled another lazy cloud of smoke. "Yeah, we get that a lot." "You don't understand what you've done," the emperor continued, voice shaking. "You've unraveled order. Without the empire, there will be nothing but war. You have not freed the galaxy. You have doomed it." Ben let out a low chuckle. "That's cute, real poetic, but let me break it down for you, Emperor." He took another step forward, closing the distance between them. "You started this war. You made the rules. You thought we'd roll over just like the others. Thought we'd beg, negotiate, maybe cry a little. And when we didn't, when we did exactly what humanity always does when someone comes for our own, you lost your damn mind." The Emperor's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. Ben sighed, rubbing his temple as if he was dealing with a particularly stubborn child. "Look, I'm not saying we're saints. Hell, we're probably the last species you ever wanted to piss off. But you killed 80,000 innocent people on live television. You turned it into a spectacle. And now you're mad that we came knocking on your door." He took another drag, shaking his head. "Buddy, you should have read up on human history. We've got a real bad habit of getting pissed off and overreacting. You ever heard of the Siege of Stalingrad? The Battle of Midway? That time a dude in a loincloth kicked an empire's ass with nothing but salt and stubbornness." The Emperor flinched as Ben took another step closer. "You underestimated us. Thought we were just another primitive species with dreams too big for our little blue rock. But we're not like the others. We don't do surrender. We don't do acceptable losses. We don't kneel." Ben reached into his benet pocket, pulling out a small device. He pressed a button, and a holographic screen flickered to life between them. The Emperor's breath caught in his throat. It was a live broadcast. Across the galaxy, millions, no billions, of beings were watching. Every occupied world, every conquered territory, every civilization that had lived in the shadow of the Empire's tyranny for centuries. They were all watching him. Ben spread his arms. "So here's the deal, Your Majesty. You've got 2 choices. Option 1. You get up on that stage, you get real close to that nice shiny microphone, and you apologize to the galaxy. You tell them the war is over. You tell them the empire is finished. And you do it with a goddamn smile. The Emperor's hands clenched into trembling fists. And the second option? Ben's grin widened, but there was nothing friendly about it. We hand you over to the Florida men. The Emperor paled. Ben leaned in, lowering his voice just enough for only the two of them to hear. Now, I don't know if you've read the reports, but our Florida battalions? They're not okay. These guys think laws are more of a suggestion. I got one dude who punched out an Imperial Walker with nothing but a bottle of beer and an alligator. I don't even know where the alligator came from. You really want to see what they do to a war criminal? The Emperor's breath hitched. His once imposing shoulders slumped. He had lost. And the worst part was, he knew it. Slowly, he turned toward the ruined dais where his grand addresses had once commanded fear and obedience. Now, it would serve a different purpose. Ben gestured toward the camera operator, a bored-looking Marine chewing gum behind the lens. Get the lighting right, will you? We want this to be historical. The Emperor ascended the broken steps, his steps heavy, his pride stripped away. The camera focused on him, the world watching. Ben stood off to the side, arms crossed as he watched the most powerful tyrant in the galaxy clear his throat, his voice shaking as he spoke the words that would seal history. The war is over. The Empire has fallen. A pause. A long, terrible silence. And then, the sound of cheering. From across the galaxy, from the lowest slums of conquered worlds to the highest towers of oppressed civilizations, the roar of celebration exploded into existence. Alien species that had lived under the yoke of tyranny for generations wept, screamed, laughed. Ben closed his eyes for a brief moment, letting the weight of it sink in. They had done it. Humanity had done it. He turned away from the scene, pulling out his communicator. Kowalski, Carter, wrap it up. We're done here. Static crackled before Carter's voice came through. Damn. Was kinda hoping we'd get to blow up a little more. Ben grinned. Nah. We've made our point. A pause. And Ben. Yeah. You do realize we just toppled an intergalactic empire in under a year using nothing but stubbornness, bad humor, and absolutely zero regard for traditional warfare, right? Ben exhaled through his nose, shaking his head with a smirk. Yeah, I do. Nice. The transmission cut. Ben turned back to the ruins of the Imperial Palace, watching as the broadcast wrapped up. The war was over. The galaxy was free. And humanity? Humanity was just getting started.